Any advice and information from this podcast is general only. It has been prepared without taking into account your individual circumstances and needs. Before acting on any advice from this podcast, you should assess and seek advice on whether it is appropriate for your needs, financial situation, and investment objectives. Hello, J-Mac, also known as Jessie, and everyone else that is out there that has taken the time to listen to us once again. Thank you very much in advance. This 20 or 30 minutes would definitely be the ride of your life. Is that right, Jessie?
Yep. If you like financial advice, sure.
Yes. Okay. Unreal. Okay. We are now on essentially sort of, I guess, the last part of our podcast relating to all things sort of buying a house, renting versus buying, how do I get a loan? This one is one of our favourite topics and one we talk about extensively with numerous clients, and that is, do we do the drum roll? Should we do the drum roll? Okay, I was going to press the button.
Oh,
all right. Real estate investment properties.
Yes.
All right. So this is bigger than Ben-Hur, and it's really interesting, and it's definitely a key financial focal point with a lot of clients we see, because a lot of clients sort of have these in their asset listing, or I'm going to say on their books. And for a lot of them, once we get into the numbers of it, not that we're going to do this today, sometimes it just isn't quite working out for them. And I guess, look, it's not our job, I guess, to go, hey, buy this, do that. It's just to outline what it looks like and how it is fitting into their financial plan. Is it fitting into their financial plan now? Obviously, it might have fit into their financial plan 5-10 years ago when they maybe didn't have kids. They had maybe more money coming in, maybe less debt. But now things have changed. Their life has changed a little bit. That is what we're sort of going to, and what we do and what we're going to get into. But I guess, it might be sort of ingrained in the Australian vernacular about real estate, and then everything you kind of see, whether it's on the interwebs, on the Grammys, on the talk, YouTube, it is about investment property, how good it looks, how rich they are. Jessie, you want to say it.
Rich bitches.
I'm rich, bitch. I got my first investment property. All right. And happy, look, if you come and see us and this is something we talk about, it's no guarantee Jessie or myself are going to say that saying. You might get offended, but we would definitely help talk you through the ins and outs of your current holding and see if it really is fit for you, and is it sort of growing your net wealth to where you want it to be, and if it's fitting into your financial picture. So, Jessie, why do you want an investment property?
I feel like this might be our top 1 or 2 questions that we usually get, isn't it? Should I get an investment property, or should I, when I move, should I make it an investment property and buy another house when I go to move? Yeah,
so you've already bought one, you might be moving with the kids, or you've we talked about in our last episode about that capital growth. Hey, my house that I bought 5-10 years ago has exploded in growth, and now I've got another $200,000-$300,000 in equity. I've paid down some of my loan. I can afford to do this thing that I'm seeing on the internet, which is like use the equity, or even I've come across some lump sum cash, whether it was from a work bonus, savings, or inheritance. I should go and get another investment property. It looks good. I can talk to my friends about it at barbecues. I can sound really sophisticated.
At the barbecue,
At the barbecue with my friends. I'll let everyone know that I've got an investment property. I think that's what I did in my mid-20s when my wife and I sort of fit into that bill. And I wish, maybe I wish I'd met Jessie then and she might have slapped me. No. So I guess, look, why are some of the reasons people, like when you ask them, Jessie, when clients come to you and we've talked about the investment property thing, do you ask them, I guess, so why do you have an investment property? Is it, why did you buy one? Or is it just something you stumbled upon, just natural progression? Is it because their mum and dad told them, or Uncle Bill was like, you'll get rich off this?
Yeah. I think it's even, like you said, ingrained in the Australian culture that, if you have a bit of money, look at investing in property. You'll make lots of growth and lots of equity, and it's a great investment.
Surely that works for some people, surely. this can't be some sort of pipe dream that works for no one.
Yeah, well, look, I think it can work, but, it's different on, you really need to have a look at the numbers and maybe have a think about it before you go and do it, because got a lot of clients that come in who have an investment or had an investment property and they find it didn't necessarily work for them. So I think it's different for everyone.
But it looks good. Surely it kind of looks good. Are they on the gram? Have they got, or are they, I don't know, is it this thing they talk about?
Yeah, look, there's those ones that kind of say, oh, yep, you get your first one, high growth, big capital city. Once that's, interest only, then you get another one and you leverage that to get another one. And we'll go through that and what that might look like. But I think you have some clients for us, do you, Yannick? We can talk through.
I do. I've met a lot now, some good, some bad, regarding once we sort of outline the figures and they're like, oh, that's where all my money's going.
Yeah.
But look, and we've talked about it in previous episodes. Sometimes it works because of the capital growth they've experienced it, especially in the last couple of years, whether it's somewhere in Queensland or in the southern states. A lot of people have experienced that capital growth, 100%. But I guess we're sort of just going to outline the general parts of it. So besides it sort of... okay, so we've sort of discussed on why we want one, and I've definitely asked a lot of clients the same thing, like why are you looking at buying one, or how is it you came across or have come into the investment property? Was it just you had your first home, then it was just natural for you to you've got enough money to buy a second home? Okay, for us the question is, does it fit into your financial plan and your picture for the future?
Yeah.
All right. Look, some things I've definitely I've noticed when I ask clients about their property. A couple of details I try and fish out of them is, look, they bought the property. Did they live in it first? Did they invest it, as in turn it into a rental straight up? It might seem like I'm digging into their client's dirty laundry, but it's more so to just tick a couple of boxes on what they should expect in the future when they sell it. Because let's just say you go to that marketing event, they spruik your property, you buy it and you invest it straight away and it's renting and it's making good returns. Just know that when you turn that over and sell it, there's going to be some capital gains there.
Yeah, some people don't know that.
Yeah, straight off the bat. But there is a difference. If you've lived in the property, the ATO gives you a bit of a leeway. I think it's called the 6-year rule. Is that right?
Yep.
Yeah. So, look, if you've lived in the property and then you move out and you're renting the property or the property out, you've got essentially 6 years to sell that property. So within that 6 years, if you sell it, regardless of the profit you make, you will not pay any capital gains. But once you go outside of that 6 years, just know that it will then become susceptible to capital gains tax, which is a story for another day. Unless you guys want to hang around for a couple of hours, surely we can.
Yeah, what's a couple of hours?
Yeah, what's a couple of hours? Cool. So just some things to consider, and by all means, with the internet these days, you can just jump on, Google search, have a look through the ATO if that's what you like doing. I know I like doing that on a Sunday morning, just sifting through legislation on the ATO.
The nice coffee.
Nothing better. But, okay, so there's those. Look, and we talked about it in the last episode about the real costs of holding an investment property, and that's kind of how we map it out with our clients. Some of them are like, yep, I bought for 400, I sold for 500, I made 100 grand. Well, that's great in a gross profit sort of sense, but year to year, month to month, you will be paying some expenses unless you've found some sort of castle of gold unicorn that doesn't cost you anything. I'm yet to find that.
Yeah, I'd like one of those.
Yeah. So just know that the real costs are there. Week to week, month to month, year to year. With your investment property, you're going to be paying an agent to look after your property. You're going to be paying maintenance, interest rates, selling costs. Well, that's when you sell it. Yes, you get some tax deductions on it. Most likely the property is negatively geared, which is another, I guess, a slight sweetener for living in Australia. That could be a story for another day. And how these costs affect your net profit. That's the one we sort of want to outline. I guess there's two things to sort of the investment property to consider, whether you're doing it at home with a spouse and looking at buying one. How's this going to affect your cash flow? And how is the potential capital growth of this property? Because if most likely, if it's negative geared, that means it's a negative cash flow. So more money is going out of your pocket week to week than coming in. And if your property isn't growing in capital growth, then you might have a slight problem because you haven't just bought something that's worth $5,000 or $10,000, which you can kind of do with shares. You've bought an asset which is $300,000, $400,000, $500,000, $600,000, and it comes with a fair bit of financial responsibility.
Yes.
Which a lot of mum and dads, like let's just say your middle, even your high income earners, once you start sort of having your normal living expenses in your 30s, whether it's kids or things like that, it starts to burn a little hole in your pocket when more money's going out than coming in. So just something to consider, not to sort of scare anyone away. But hey, and look, if you want to talk about it over a warm cup of tea and potentially a cuddle, I know a financial advisor in Townsville that may be able to help you. Are we allowed to say that?
I don't know, but you did, so watch
God.
out. See if we get edited.
It looks like I'm clearing out my desk on Monday. Okay, so we've sort of talked about the real costs and definitely something to appreciate. So Jessie and I have alluded to, well, Jessie more so than myself, we've seen a heap of clients that have an investment property on their asset portfolio, and we're able to walk through with them or talk through with them how that investment is going for them. So I guess we've got a heap of case studies which we can sort of bang through just to highlight a few things. Now, remember, this is just your everyday investment properties, and the real estate investment market isn't just for your high income earners, whether it's your corporate types, big income earners, bankers, doctors. This is a majority of people that negative gear in Australia and have investment properties are your mums and dads, and even not mums and dads, just your normal income earners, anywhere in between the $70,000 and $140,000 mark per person. So the household's probably making $200, give or take, tens of thousands of dollars. They're the ones that have sort of jumped onto this real estate property thing, and that's who we're sort of looking at. Look, as a kind of case study, we look at, let's just say, a couple of teachers living in Townsville. A senior teacher, not to be too personal with it, but we know you can get this information straight off the Queensland Education website. A senior teacher makes about $120,000, $125,000 a year. So let's just say you have a couple that are doing that. The household makes $240,000 a year. This is sort of what we're looking at. They both sort of sit in that 32% sort of tax bracket. So with that income, their effective tax rate's roughly around the 25-26% mark, even though they're paying 32 cents to the dollar for some of their income. These are a lot of the clients that we see, were the teachers, nurses, police women and men, tradies, etc. This is sort of where it fits into. So, some considerations with the investment property. Your loan. Most people will try, most loans are 25 to 30 years. The longer the loan, the smaller the repayments will be, but the more interest you will pay back over time. But it lets you essentially make that loan just a little bit more serviceable. There is a fair bit of a difference between a 25-year loan and a 30-year loan if you're borrowing $400,000 or $500,000. What to do with that loan? Is it going to be interest only, or is it going to be principal and interest? There are pros and cons.
Yeah, well, I guess the aim of the game with investment properties is to get, your expenses as low as you can, so you might be able to rely on capital growth. So I think maybe a lot of people might try and leverage the interest only, but like you said, won't have as much repayments, but that kind of affects you in the long term if you don't kind of get that capital growth or yeah.
So look, interest only, I take it, Jessie, you can sort of negotiate with the banks. Let's just say, because I think there's a few banks out there that offer 1, 2 or 3 years of interest only, and that's just a quick internet search on some of the main banks out there. That's all well and good. It lowers your repayments by a small amount, but I guess after that interest only period is finished, you haven't paid any of the loan amount off, have you? You just paid the interest back.
Yeah, that's
so you're saying that it helps with your cash flow
temporarily,
okay. But look, and for some people that are really chasing that dream, that lets them service that loan, because the interest only loan might shave off $100 per fortnight or month in repayments. Yeah, okay, that's interesting. And yeah, some people do that. So, look, we might as well make this more relatable to our millions of listeners out there. As we talked about, everyday families. What are their names again?
Can we name them Jane and Joe?
Jane and Joe.
The teachers.
Done. They're both teachers. They're making about 110, 120 a year, give or take. Their effective tax rate's about 25, 26% once they do stuff. Okay, so a little bit of a case study. Bear with us. We might talk about some numbers. So, Jane and Joe.
Jane and Joe.
How do you go? What's your workflow? Oh, that was pretty bad. Okay.
Well done. You did that on the spot. That's impressive.
Yeah.
So Jane and Joe have bought or are thinking about buying a property, and they found one for $670,000. They've got that 20% deposit. So essentially they have a loan of about $530,000.
So 20% deposit, that's sort of what the banks want you to do. I don't know what a lank is, but a bank is, so that gets you out of that LMI or that additional cost, okay?
Yeah, reference episode 1 for other options. So what we kind of look at is what you've got coming in versus what you've got going out. So, for example, these guys have, they're thinking they might get $675 a week of rent.
Okay, is that sort of, is that a generic, say, Townsville thing, or is that a Queensland thing, or is that, I guess, a respectable price they can get?
Yeah, usually what we find in Townsville, if they have, a $500,000 property, they're probably going to get $500 a week.
Give or take? Okay.
Give or take, yeah. Cool. So this is just kind of the property they're looking at.
Yep.
Rates in Townsville, maybe about $3,800, $4,000 a year.
Damn.
Insurance is a little higher in Townsville because we have all those wonderful cyclones.
Oh,
so
how good are they when it blows through your hair? Anyway, yep.
So that might be another $2,000. We've put, $1,500 for maintenance. Maybe if you have a newer house, that might be about right. Maybe if an older one, if you get a roof leak, that's another $20,000 we haven't accounted for.
And considering real estate is sort of more of that mid to long term hold, isn't it? We're not really talking about buy this year to flip next year. This is sort of a bit of a longer term plan. Okay, yep.
You got your agent's fees to kind of look after the property for you, so that might be about $3,500 a year.
Yep, most agents will usually charge a percentage of the rent that you're bringing in. They'll charge a percentage on that. Is that right? Cool.
Yeah.
That can range from anywhere from potentially 5, 10, 12%.
Yeah.
Depends on where.
And then your biggest cost being the repayments. So looking at, that 20% deposit, about a 6.3% interest rate.
That's about the going rate, yep.
Average, isn't it, Yannick? Yeah. Then, you've got about $40,000 worth of repayments if you're, making that principal and interest.
Okay. So a 500, let's just say $530,000 loan, 30 years, 6.3%, principal and interest on that is nearly $40,000. Okay. And then if we're talking about the interest only sort of side of things, what's an interest only sort of loan calculation on that loan?
Yeah, well, that looks, it kind of reduces you don't have to pay that principal amount of about $6,000 a year, yeah.
Right, so it's about a $6,000 difference. Okay, so monthly that's about $500 a month. That's reduced with the by taking the principal out, and that's an option you can have with the banks if this is what you want to do. Okay, thank you.
And then I guess a quick comparison: we've got about $35,000 of rent coming in a year. And
I'm rich.
Repayments, and you can see those expenses add up. So you've got about $50,000 going out. So you can see quite quickly that gross or overall you're probably down about $15,000 a year.
$15,000 a year. So that's
in this
money,
example.
That's money in this example. Okay, and that's definitely sort of that could be an average sort of. Not that everyone's going to buy a $670,000 investment property, but it's definitely. A lot of people can do it, especially Jane and Joe.
Jane and Joe.
Medium income earners. So at the end of the year, or even fortnight to fortnight, there's about $600 going out the door than coming in. Okay, what about this negative gearing thing that we sort of talked about?
Yeah, so I guess on that $15,000, you're down $15,000 a year. You might get some negative gearing, so you might get some tax back from the government because the property is negatively geared. So you might, get $5,000 back.
Okay, so essentially
on your tax return.
So how does that work? Negative gearing is essentially if your income producing asset is running at a loss, the ATO, Australian Taxation Office, will give you just a little bit of an incentive or a tax ride to go, hey, well, that's a tax deduction. We talked about that Jane and Joe, their effective tax rate's about the 25%. So with about 15,000 going out or at a loss, they're getting about 3,900 back in tax. But that's not the whole gap though, is it? They're not. So they're losing 15,000 a year in cash flow, but they're only really getting about $4,000 back in tax. Still, I don't know. I failed to pass year one maths, but there's about 11 grand there that's sort of missing.
Exactly, yeah.
So is that what you talked about in the last episode, where they are now that they're negatively geared, more cash going out than in, they are relying on capital growth?
For sure.
Right.
Or paying down the property. If the property's fully paid down, you don't have those repayments of $40,000 a year.
Yeah, but isn't that a 30-year loan? So if there were no repayments, they've essentially got to hold this loan for, say, 30 years, pay off the loan, and then they can sit.
You might get some positive cash flow.
Well, you'd hope so. Okay, so after their negative gear or their tax rebate, it looks like their net return is still about negative $11,500, give or take, a year. So there's about $450 a fortnight going out of their pocket after they've had a little tax kick. So I guess, Jessie, is there do you use like a metric, whether it's, I don't know, to show like how the investment's performing? Is it like, what do you see?
We use a term called return on investment. So in this case, we'd look at, how much you're making over how much you've kind of spent. So you've spent $670,000 essentially on a property, and you expect as an investment to make you a return. So in this case, you're probably down about, like you said, $11,500 a year. So that return on investment percentage is about 1.75% negative.
So negative 1.75%. Hold on. Start of this episode, I'm pretty sure you said this little word, I'm rich. But looking at that, you've taken this decent loan on, you've got more money going out than coming in, and at the end of the financial year, you've done your tax return, you've done your negative gearing, you are still negative 1.75%. And that's year to year sort of.
Yeah, I think people, like you said, rely on that capital growth in the long term, and they don't kind of necessarily spruik this on the YouTube videos or the gram, like you said. They're kind of going through, the equity, and you can buy, another property off this property and kind of keep building that way.
Okay.
So, I guess and this is what we kind of find from clients they're experiencing as well. You might be losing money year to year, but they kind of hope that in the long term it would pay off.
Right. So it sounds like a bit of a calculated kind of gamble. No doubt it is. So short term, I guess there's only one happy party here, and that's the banks. No, shout out to all the banks for lending all that money. The big four make up a big chunk of the ASX 20, ASX 50. I don't know. They make super funds heaps of money. But when we've bashed out those figures, to know that you're running at a negative 1.75% return on investment year on year for the foreseeable future is pretty sort of hefty. But I guess we haven't got into the growth side, so it's not all doom and gloom. But look, and as with most of the nation, definitely on the eastern side, has experienced, the last couple of years has returned capital growth. That is a definite. And I guess with investment properties, you're looking more at the long term, unless you're sort of into that property flipping sort of side of things. So by all means, go about it if you can turn a dollar. But okay, let's just say, you mentioned before Townsville does, the last 10 years it's averaged about 4%. So I guess if we have a look at that side of the maths, yes, it's negative cash flow, but it's growing at about 4% a year. Let's just say we want to hold the property for 10 years. How does that look? Have we made any money?
Yeah, well, look, if we base it on that 4%, like you said, and that's probably the absolute best because that's including COVID and the huge demand that we've had, this property might make close to $300,000. So it's gone from $670,000 to maybe almost $1 million property.
In 10 years?
In 10 years.
Wow.
So it sounds impressive. Oh, yeah, I've got an extra $300,000. But you've also paid over those 10 years about $120,000. You've been kind of down. So when we looked at that, you're losing $11,500 a year over those 10 years, that equates to, almost 120,000. You pay some tax if you sell the property, so you get capital gains. You get a 50% discount, but then you also pay some tax. So if you kind of look at your kind of profit after tax and all the costs you've paid, maybe you're at 130,000.
So over the 10 years?
Over the 10 years.
Okay, so you talked about that ROI thing, or the return on investment. Do you sort of average that out over 10 years?
So over 10 years, they've made a return of investment of about 19%. But if you break that down to what have they made each year in, say, capital growth, it's about 2%.
Okay.
And when you kind of compare that to if you put that money in a term deposit or savings, at the moment, a nice
accounts.
one. What are they about?
4 to 5%.
5%.
I've seen a few around the 5.5, and I guess that doesn't come with any sort of stresses and dramas.
Can pull it out when you want to.
Okay. No, fair enough. But look, that's the long-term sort of side of, I guess, that 4%, which is fair enough. No doubt, and we've seen it with some clients, they were able to sort of buy or build 2, 3, 4 years ago, be able to sell that property, and have definitely made a big capital growth, anywhere in between the 10, 12% per year. As we said before, it's a case-by-case basis. Not everyone's sort of got that money to load up and go again on real estate, because I guess, look, there's heaps of pros and cons with real estate, but we will most likely talk about that stuff. Okay, so we've gone through what the property's sort of doing week to week, year to year in cash flow sense. Over X amount of years, whether it's 2, 5, 10 years, it's grown at X% as well. So if it has grown, what happens if I do want to bankroll another property? How do I come up with another 20%? Let's just say I'm on realestate.com or whatever website, and I've found another investment property that's worth 500 grand. I know that I should be getting together 20% deposit, which is 100 grand. But at the moment, I've got a couple of wallet leeches, which are my kids, that are just sucking the money out of me. Look, we're making good money, but we might be paying the mortgage or the rent that we currently live in. Our current investment property is negative geared at about $600 a fortnight before tax rebate or refund. But how do people talk about this using equity in your home. Is it something people can do? How does it work? Like, do I just pluck some money from somewhere?
Yeah.
Out
of the universe.
Wait, I heard about my parents used to talk about this whole money tree that used to grow out in the backyard.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I'd leave the aircon on with the lights on. They'd be like, "Do you think money grows on trees?" Is that what people use to?
Well, I think the general idea is to use the equity in the investment property, which you might have if, the property's grown to, say, $800,000.
Okay, so let's just say if we bought a $675,000 property, in about 4 to 5 years, the value's gone up. All things being equal, it's gone up by 4%. So in about 4 to 5 years, it's about 800,000. Okay, so the equity means it's grown in value. Now, let's just say we are still doing the interest-only side of things, so we haven't paid off the principal. So my big home loans, my investment loan's still there, 536,000 odd. The bank still wants me to have a loan-to-value ratio of 80%. Mm-hmm. So essentially, my available equity to use is about $100,000 or $104,000. So you're saying I could potentially use that to bankroll another property. Right. That sounds easy enough, and it sounds gram sexy, but I know there has to be some catch or hidden costs or hidden sort of warning signs with that. Surely property hasn't just had year-on-year growth for the last 30 years. Surely there's been a couple of downsides, or yes, the national average has increased, but when you're comparing two different suburbs, surely there's been some periods where they've reduced in their growth.
Yeah.
Okay, so that might affect me as well.
Yeah, well, even looking at Townsville, say, Jane and Joe from Townsville, we're looking at a property there. Over the last 10 years, it's averaged a 4% return. But taking out COVID, which was, wild, a bit crazy, there was a high demand. The government put the interest rates down, so a lot of people were buying houses.
I remember that interest rates were like 2%. I remember I
Yeah.
managed to get mine to like 1.89. Okay.
Yeah, good times.
Yeah. So people were borrowing more.
Yeah, and
okay.
if we take out that portion of the last 10 years, the growth was actually closer to 0.5% or 1% on average. So,
Okay.
that 4% might be absolute best case scenario with someone renting that, 365 days of the year,
Yep.
no roof leaks.
Okay.
Best case scenario,
Cool.
100 grand to play with.
Look, I guess what we can sort of highlight to listeners to take away from this, there are pros and cons with the investment property side, and there's definitely pros and cons with the equity you can use, because it's kind of a double-edged weapon. It can definitely work for you when things turn a bit sour or your life circumstances change, whether it's extra kids or reducing your workload to go back to uni or changing career or an accident happens and your income drops right off or you or for whatever. That equity you've used to buy another house, which is then also most likely negatively geared, can have sort of compounding effects on your cash flow week to week. Yeah, or even month to month.
Yeah, the question is, I guess, if you want to buy another investment property, if this one's, you're losing about $11,500 a year, do we want to buy another investment property where now we're down 20, 30K a year, we're making 40K worth of, repayments. If we got two houses, then that's $80,000 worth of repayments for Jane and Joe, who are... That takes up the majority of their income, and with the cost of living, can we still afford, kids' school fees and stuff like that?
Right.
Or do we use the term deposit where you can put your savings aside and earn 5.5% doing nothing, can sell, take them out at any time. You can't sell a bathroom, unfortunately. So
Seems conservative, but I see how it works, and I see how it kind of alleviates the stress for some people. Because you've got to take there's a bit of a calculated risk there to bankroll a big loan on the hope that your property over time will grow by X percent. Because if it doesn't, and as we've sort of talked about with those figures, month to month, there is money walking out the door than coming in. So the growth is what you're relying on. Not fair enough. Yeah, okay. Excellent. Thank you for taking us through that, Jessie. That's... I thought it was all about the gram life and investment property, but I'll try and debunk this one. Excellent. Well, that sort of that about wraps up, I guess, everything to do with buying your first home, what to look for, what to expect, whether it's banks, brokers, rates, types of loans, loan sharks, agent sharks, something sharks, using equity, real estate investment property, looking good on the gram. Hopefully we've covered all those. Hopefully everyone that's listened has enjoyed it to some extent. And the good news is we will be back with another fresh topic sometime soon. Jessie, thank you very much. And we will have this kicking off again very soon. Thank you.
Thanks, guys.
Ciao.